My crush on Alaric Thornton is no secret. Not just to my class. The whole school knows. It all started when I was on duty at the school radio station, gossiping with my bestie. I told her, I'm so into Alaric Thornton. Don't tell anyone, okay? The next day, everyone knew. Want to know why? We'd left the mic on in the broadcast room. Since then, Alaric and I have been under the teacher's watchful eyes. They even moved our seats to opposite corners of the classroom. If you ask me, it's totally unnecessary. Because Alaric? He doesn't give me the time of day. They say it's easy for a girl to catch a boy. But with Alaric, it's like trying to break through a brick wall. I remember the first time I confessed to him. I cornered him outside the boys' loo. I said, I like you. He replied, you like me? So, do you like my ID, ego, or superego? Perhaps at 15 or 16, one can't grasp such profound philosophical questions. I just stared at him, dumbfounded. Young Alaric was already showing signs of the heartthrob he'd become. I mean, he was just too handsome. Even his frown was a work of art. He said, if you can't answer such a simple question, how can you claim to like me? Alaric Thornton says meeting me must be a punishment from his past life. Ever since I discovered he'd moved in across the hall from me, I've been relentlessly pestering him. I follow him to school, I follow him back home, and I persistently send him good morning and good night messages every day. I initially wanted to bring him breakfast too, but I can't wake up early enough. So usually, he's the one bringing me breakfast. He says he can bring it for me, as long as I don't write him love letters. My writing is so poor, he says, that he can't help but want to tear them up when he reads them. Is that any way for a boy to talk to his admirer? Actually, before the whole school found out about my crush on him, his seat used to be right behind mine. After our form tutor found out, she immediately moved us far apart and forbade us from going home together after school. I was devastated. But Alaric, that chap, could barely keep from grinning ear to ear. So that night, I didn't send Alaric a good night message. I was truly upset and started to think I might have been too forward. I decided to tone it down a bit, but then that night, after midnight, when I hadn't sent Alaric a good night message, he sent me a question mark. My brain immediately conjured up a whole imaginary scenario. After agonizing for 5 minutes, I replied, "Are you asking me for a good night message?" The next day, he responded, "Sent the question mark to the wrong person. Sorry about that." My crush sent me 2 whole messages. I was over the moon. So the next day, I went back to pestering him with questions about our homework. Alaric's fingers were even more beautiful than the statues in the art room, casually brushing against the edge of the maths paper. Then, he pondered for a moment. He looked up, gazing at me quietly. Such a simple question, do you really need to ask? Even though I had picked the question at random, I can assure you it was one I couldn't solve. He furrowed his brow, put the paper aside, and cleared his throat before saying to me, "Last night, that question mark. It wasn't me who sent it to you, it was my dog." Seeing me frozen in place, he frowned slightly. "Don't you believe me? Should I believe him?" Recently during lunch breaks, Zeb Cargill, the notorious nap enthusiast in our class, suddenly started dragging me to play chess with him. He's become obsessed with chess lately, and somehow heard that I was an amateur champion. So, he's been cornering me for several lunchtimes to play. Today I was particularly drowsy and didn't really want to play, but Zeb was full of energy, capturing several of my pieces in quick succession. I was about to concede when suddenly a slender hand reached from behind me, plucked the black piece from my fingers, and made a move for me. I turned around and found myself staring into Alaric Thornton's dark eyes. I heard him snicker. "Are you really this rubbish? Why did he have to choose today of all days to watch our game? Just yesterday I had utterly demolished Zeb, leaving him without a chance." "Alaric, you play too?" Zeb asked, still cocky and completely unaware of the fate that awaited him now that Alaric had taken over. I had a vague memory of a match from primary school where Alaric had reduced me to tears with his skill. Soon enough, I was pleased to see Zeb's expression change from confident to concerned. Finally, he tossed his pieces aside, declaring he'd never play chess with Alaric again. Well, there goes another potential chess prodigy, extinguished before he even began. How are you so good? I looked up at Alaric behind me, grinning. Even from this deadly angle, he looked handsome. He lowered his gaze to meet mine, leaning down so his shadow enveloped me perfectly. Had enough of leaning on me? He asked, his thin lips barely moving. Right, I'd been resting against him this whole time. I thought he hadn't noticed. The evening sun cast its rays along the corridor, the gorgeous red of the sunset reflecting off the polished tiles that the duty prefect had diligently cleaned. Perhaps human joys and sorrows will always remain incomprehensible to one another. I hadn't dwelled on this thought for long before the sound of an electric scooter pulled me back to reality. It was Alaric Thornton, stopping his scooter beside me. How are you getting home? He asked nonchalantly. By bus, I suppose. I replied, moving a bit closer to him with my hands behind my back. Or perhaps you'd like to give me a lift, Alaric? Usually, I'd say such things just to tease him. But this time, he nodded. So I hopped onto the back of his scooter. The gentle evening breeze fluttered his clothes as we rode. I couldn't resist touching his waist. Even through his clothes, I could tell it felt particularly nice. He didn't react, so I indulged myself until we reached my front door. I reluctantly let go, feeling a bit guilty for taking such liberties. I was about to dash inside when he caught me by the collar. Half of the young man's face was bathed in the sunset. He looked down at me with a lazy expression. Then, right in front of me, he lifted his shirt. Didn't you enjoy touching? Go on then, feel. His boldness caught me off guard. Scared now? After I hesitated for about half a minute, he lowered his shirt. For the next 2 hours, I was filled with regret. All right then, Alaric. Bye, hope we'll see each other tomorrow. I backed away, gazing pitifully at his abs, now hidden beneath his shirt. Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist. The young man's expression was hard to read in the fading light as he stared at me intently. Want to come over to mine for a bit? Although Alaric was acting unusually today, and his invitation was tempting, I had a physics test paper in my bag with a score of 69, and I'd already been lectured by the physics teacher. Alaric, I did terribly in physics, I need to. Physics? I'll help you revise. It'll only take 10 minutes. He didn't let me finish before pulling me towards his house. Get your test paper out then. He really was going to help me with physics. Seeing my hesitation to unzip my bag, he sighed. At this point, I began to realize something. Alaric, is there something you want me to do? After a moment, his seemingly cool and lazy demeanor softened slightly. He pressed his lips together and gave a small nod. Then, he led me to his garden. He bent down to open a dog kennel, and a black and white puppy bounded out, grinning at me. It was his border collie, called Professor. Alaric crouched down and patted the dog's head. Then I watched as he unlocked his phone and placed it in front of the dog. The dog barked twice and pawed at the screen, operating it somehow. A moment later, I received a message. A single question mark. Sent to me from Alaric's phone, by his dog. I finally understood. So you lured me to your house just to show me your dog sending question marks? After the performance, Alaric stood up and patted the dog's head again. The dog wagged its tail happily. Then Alaric looked at me impassively, his face expressionless. All right, you can go now. During the break between lunch and the first afternoon lesson, I was planning to have a quick nap at my desk. But Bronte Eastham, the girl sitting behind me, shook me awake. Hey, look at the door, she whispered. Is that your arrival? I groggily lifted my head in the direction she was looking. There I saw Alaric Thornton leaning against the classroom doorframe, chatting with a girl. Who's that? I asked, tilting my head slightly towards Bronte. Don't know. Heard from the class next door that she's a new transfer student, Bronte replied. She came to borrow a book and now she won't leave Alaric alone. Hearing this, I finally snapped. I grabbed the book on my desk and strode over to the pair talking at the door, positioning myself between them and blocking the girl's view of Alaric. It was then that I noticed how tall she was. Though her skin was a bit dark, her features were quite striking. Excuse me, did you want to borrow a book? You can borrow mine, I said, offering her the book in my hand. My sudden appearance seemed to startle her, and she looked at me with surprise. Then, raising an eyebrow, she let out a contemptuous laugh. "You want to lend me your book?" The girl had been about to take my book when Alaric stopped her. He turned and handed her his own book instead. Alaric was actually willing to lend out his own things? When I'd asked to borrow from him before, he'd always refused point blank. As I returned to my seat, I couldn't stop thinking about the smug look the girl had given me as she'd taken Alaric's book. The exam we just finished yesterday had already been marked at breakneck speed. Our form tutor said that while the overall scores hadn't been tallied yet, the top student in the year had been determined. However, it seemed the results had put our form tutor in a bad mood. She leaned on the lectern with one hand on her hip. This time, the top scorer overall is Venus Carr, who just transferred to the class next door, she announced. "You might want to learn from her. The girl is truly impressive." As soon as class ended, the room erupted into chatter. "Blimey, what do you call this? The coronation of a new queen and the fall of the old king. Alaric, you're not first anymore. When is the office most crowded?" Undoubtedly, it's when the exam results are out. By the time we arrived at the office, a group of people had already surrounded the teachers in layers. Bronte tugged at my sleeve. "Ah, so that's Venus Carr." I followed her gaze. A girl was being praised by several teachers gathered around her. She looked somewhat familiar. Then it dawned on me. Wasn't she the girl who had just borrowed a book from Alaric Thornton? What pained me most was that this Venus girl seemed to have completely latched onto Alaric. The school canteen isn't usually very busy at lunchtime, but from where I was sitting, I could see Alaric eating quietly by himself. Then the girl directly sat down opposite him. She said something to Alaric, and he actually responded to her. I felt a bit unhappy. To be honest, I didn't understand why I was so upset, because Alaric didn't even belong to me yet. But I still felt sad, as if something had been quietly taken away from me. When I reached my front door, I suddenly realized I'd left my keys at home in my rush this morning. I called my mom only to get an earful. I had no choice but to sit on the stairs and wait, slowly counting the shadows of the setting sun passing through the hallway until an electric bike approached. Alaric, with Venus riding pillion. To be honest, I had imagined this day would come, but it still hurt. "Hi, I think we've met before," the girl said, bouncing off the bike and greeting me. I looked up at her bright smile. "I live in this estate too, in Building 3, flat 402 at the back," she said. "So, I just hitched a ride with Alaric." Her tone sounded like she was showing off. Then, to my surprise, she leaned forward and patted my head. "What am I, a dog?" I hurriedly stood up, wanting to glare back defiantly. But she had already curved her eyes, challengingly mouthing bye-bye to me. Alaric Thornton unlocked the door to his house. After a moment, he looked down at me. "Forgot your house key?" he asked. I nodded. "Want to come in for a bit?" I pursed my lips and shook my head. He remained silent for a while, then called my name. I looked up at him. He was absent-mindedly fiddling with his keys in his hand. He spoke, enunciating each word. "That girl, she likes me." Oh wow, how impressive. I didn't understand why he was telling me this, but I couldn't help feeling a pang in my heart. It's often like this, people can't avoid feeling confused about why they're upset. That evening, the sound of him closing the garden gate behind him echoed clearly in my ears. During the summer holidays, our class was about to be divided into those participating in competitions and those who weren't. Because our school was quite small, we unfortunately had to go elsewhere for training and selection. Anyway, I was in for a period of communal living. At 7:30 in the morning, the coach was waiting at the school gates to pick us up. I finally got on the bus to find it almost full. I managed to find a seat next to an empty one, hugging my backpack and watching people in the aisle. Then, the person I least wanted to see sat down next to me. I now reluctantly classified Venus Carr as an enemy, so naturally, I didn't have a pleasant expression for her. She seemed to be in a good mood, even humming a tune. I edged closer to the window, but she didn't hum for long. Because someone leaned on the seat and tapped her backrest. Alaric Thornton looked down at me, but his words were directed at Venus. "Excuse me, Your bus is next door. Your form tutor is looking for you. Come on, Alaric, are you really going to snitch on me? Snitch? I'm just helping maintain school discipline. I gradually lost track of their conversation, but I could tell they seemed quite familiar with each other. I felt even more jealous. The coach had already started moving, and there were no other seats available, so Alaric put down his bag and sat next to me. The person beside me sat down without saying a word to me. I didn't mind and kept staring at him intently. I stared until he finally turned around, his beautiful dark eyes looking at me without hesitation. It's 457 miles from our school to Ludlow. What? He sighed. I mean, I remember you get carsick, so you should get some sleep. Just don't throw up on me again. I had a memorable experience of throwing up on him in primary school. How could this guy hold a grudge for so long? Those who made it here were already considered the cream of the crop among their peers. I had anticipated fierce competition, but I never imagined it would be this intense. I heard that a girl who usually topped her class at school broke down in tears in her dormitory because she performed so poorly. What struck me the hardest was Venus Carr's remarkable progress. Before the intensive training, her math scores were on par with mine. But in the subsequent tests, she had far surpassed me, while I showed no improvement at all. A few days ago, after finishing a test, I felt quite confident. However, when the results came out, I had made several times more mistakes than usual. I was genuinely upset but didn't want to cry. To make matters worse, the teacher announced that several students had shown obvious regression and suggested that those who weren't serious about the competition should quit to avoid wasting their time. I stood there in a daze until we were dismissed, then wandered aimlessly to fill my water bottle, staring blankly at the flowing water. The hot water overflowed, scalding my skin. My hand jerked, and the glass tumbled to the floor, shattering. Suddenly, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. I missed home, my mom, and questioned why I even came here. At that moment, when my emotions reached their peak and I was ready to give up, a figure appeared in the doorway of the break room. Alaric Thornton leaned against the doorframe, watching me. His expression was impassive, and I couldn't decipher the emotion in his voice. Is it really necessary to cry over something so trivial? I knew someone like Alaric Thornton would never understand me. He thought reaching his level was a given, but it's not. How dare you dismiss all my efforts with just one sentence? I shouted at him, probably for the first time ever. I ran out of the break room without looking back. But misfortunes never come singly. Someone in the girls' dormitory lost an expensive fountain pen. And during the time it went missing, I wasn't in the classroom or within sight of other students. The training instructors weren't as strict in supervising us as our school teachers. This incident wasn't particularly major, but it wasn't minor either. The teacher only called me to the office and told me it would be best if I could prove I was with someone else at that time. I immediately remembered that I was in the break room with Alaric Thornton that day. So, I spent the whole afternoon looking for Alaric, but couldn't find him anywhere. Finally, I caught up with him on the way to the dining hall. I grabbed his wrist, and he looked down at me. Alaric, a fountain pen went missing from our dorm, and I need an alibi too. So what does that have to do with me? We were in the break room together that day. I was getting a bit anxious, then I met his deep, intense gaze. He narrowed his eyes at me and said, word by word, "How did you yell at me that day? Why should I help you?" He always seemed to treat me this way. The first to laugh at me, the first to mock me. I felt a bit sad and let go of his sleeve. He sneered and said, looking down, that if I had nothing else, I shouldn't bother him. He didn't want to get involved. I nodded and said okay, but before I could finish speaking, someone came up from behind and put an arm around Alaric's shoulders. "Alaric, the teacher was just looking for you. She said she accepts your statement confirming Sienna's whereabouts. But she wants to know what you two were doing in the break room that day. No early romance allowed, you know." I stared blankly at Alaric, whose face was rapidly darkening. "Alaric, you've already vouched for me?" I turned and asked the other person. "Yeah, he went to the office earlier and told the teacher. He was in such a hurry." "Alaric!" What are you doing? The boy's mouth was completely covered by Alaric's hand, and he was dragged away. Shut up. The two disappeared from my sight, pushing and pulling each other. That night, the same boy showed up at our classroom door again. He waved at me, and I went out to ask what he wanted. He handed me a tube of burn ointment. Who's it from? From me, of course. The boy grinned at me. I stared at him for a few seconds. Haha, it's from Alaric, but he told me not to tell you. I knew it. Let me tell you that Alaric, out of his whole body, apart from that place, his mouth is the hardest. The boy patted my shoulder knowingly. Actually, I'd love to see him flustered. So, good luck, I'm off to do some problems. Bye. After the training camp ended, the competition began. We moved from the training dormitory to a hotel near the exam venue. The exam lasted for 2 days. The question types this time were quite novel. I hadn't expected that after so many years of competitions, the examiners could still come up with new tricks. Though I said I wouldn't calculate my score, I still checked the answers. As it turned out, there was a question I thought I had solved correctly, but the result was terribly wrong. So for those 2 days, I felt a bit down. The night before the results were announced, I couldn't sleep at all. On our floor of the hotel, there was a large open-air terrace at the far end. I was feeling a bit restless, so around 1 or 2 in the morning, I suddenly sat up and went there. Next to the hotel were distant hills, and the autumn night breeze carried a chill that wasn't too biting. Some plants were growing near the terrace, with tiny lights hidden among them. I heard a noise behind me and instinctively turned around. I saw Alaric Thornton with one hand in his trouser pocket, using the other to open the terrace door. When he saw me, his hand froze. We must have stared at each other silently for quite a while before he closed the door. Wait! Why did he close the terrace door after seeing me? That's too heartbreaking. I took a deep breath and turned back to lean on the railing, continuing to feel the breeze. I sniffled a bit, until suddenly someone draped a coat over my shoulders. The person beside me quietly looked at me. When he lowered his eyes, there was always a hint of nonchalance. Under the moonlight, his skin seemed even paler. Feeling sad over such a small thing again, he said. I looked up and glared at him. No wonder Alaric Thornton wasn't popular, he always managed to unintentionally hit people's sore spots. Did you do very well in this exam? I asked, my tone a bit harsh. He smiled slightly. Not bad, full marks. I might not believe others, but I actually believed Alaric Thornton. We came from the same school, yet the gap was so big. It was quite disheartening. Alaric, I said. I didn't do well in the exam, so don't show off in front of me. He narrowed his eyes and looked at me for a while. I suddenly realized that the usually cold-faced person now had a faint smile. He lowered his head a bit, his handsome face suddenly magnified in front of me. A teasing laugh escaped from his throat. Then, my lips brushed against something. He was kissing me. It seems to take only a second for a person's mind to go from racing thoughts to completely blank. I stood there in a daze, letting him kiss me. He took hold of my wrist, then advanced further. Until I caught a whiff of alcohol. His head dropped to the crook of my neck and stayed there, motionless. Alaric? Hey. Alaric. You didn't drink, did you? After escorting Alaric Thornton back to his room, I finally felt a bit knackered. He let me drag him along, collapsing onto me like a rag doll. The lads opened the door and started jeering. On any other day, I'd have egged them on, making it even more of a spectacle. I'd have loved for Alaric to never live it down. But just now, he'd kissed me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. On the way back to my room, I found myself unconsciously touching my lips. I kept thinking about how his thin lips had pressed against mine. The next day, it seemed he'd forgotten all about it. In the green room, I stood next to him, trying to spot any differences from his usual self. He was adjusting the collar of his suit. We were all required to wear formal attire for the upcoming award ceremony. I was used to seeing him in school uniform, but in a suit, he looked inexplicably dashing and sharp. After I'd been staring at him for 2 minutes and 37 seconds, he finally looked at me. What's the matter? Alaric, do you remember what happened last night when you were drunk? How did you know I was drinking last night? As expected, he didn't remember a thing. He picked up his tie from the table, his fingers entwining with the silk ribbon, inexplicably eye-catching. After a moment, he lowered his head slightly. Help me with this. I stared into his bright eyes for a while, but couldn't find anything in those dark pools. I used the tie to choke him tightly. You cad! He was caught off guard by my sudden move and nearly lost his balance. Covering his neck, he coughed a few times. Glancing at me, he smirked with dissatisfaction. Huh, first time I've been called that. Alaric Thornton was, unsurprisingly, the first. In truth, every time he stood on the winner's podium, I suddenly felt the distance between us was immense. A wave of hushed excitement would ripple through the crowd below. Some would whisper about how handsome this boy was. Camera flashes would go off, aimed at him, and he'd stand there, never showing a hint of stage fright. He'd say, "This first place is rightfully mine." A mixture of gasps and cheers would erupt from the audience. Without a doubt, the name Alaric Thornton would become known to even more people. Not making it into the national training squad meant we had to return to our classes. Venus Carr came back with me. She had it worse, missing the national training squad cut off by just one place. At lunch, Venus sat across from me and spent the entire meal talking about Alaric Thornton. She said, "Stop fancying Alaric Thornton." I glared at her. "That's none of your business." She smiled, seeming to hold back some secret scheme. After school, she called out to me from behind. To be honest, her skin might be a bit dark, but it seemed to suit her features, giving her a certain allure. I'd even seen a younger boy confess his feelings for her recently. "Does your class finish this late too?" "I think we live quite close to each other. Let's walk home together from now on." She linked her arm with mine. I tried to pull away, but couldn't. Days passed like this. People can change their minds about many things. For instance, after many, many days, my opinion of Venus Carr. By the time Alaric Thornton returned, Venus and I had become inseparable friends. So much for being love rivals. It had been a long time since I'd seen Alaric Thornton. I'd started to think Venus Carr was more important to me than Alaric Thornton. The first day of my period is always particularly painful. So that day, during morning exercise, I didn't go out but instead lay down in the classroom. I rested my chin on the desk, tilting my head up to look at the test paper in my hand. "It's different, not difference," a slow, cool voice suddenly sounded beside me. I turned my head to see the person behind me looking at me with relaxed eyes. I was stunned for quite a while, until the pen I was twirling in my hand slipped and fell to the floor with a clatter. He crouched down and picked up the pen for me. He poked my cheek with the end of the pen disapprovingly, which finally snapped me out of my daze. "You're back," I said. He made a sound of acknowledgement and after a moment, raised an eyebrow at me. "What kind of posture is that?" I suddenly remembered that I was lying on the desk because my stomach hurt so much. I tried to open my thermos to drink some hot water, but suddenly realized it was empty. I showed him the empty cup, looking at him pitifully. "Alaric." He paused for a second or two, then took it. I heard him mutter under his breath. "Troublesome." "Troublesome?" "Then don't get her water," a voice suddenly sounded from behind. Venus Carr handed me a stack of test papers, saying softly, "These are for your class. I'll help you hand them out later." Turning to Alaric, she raised her voice, "Give me her cup, I'll fill it for her." "Why should you?" Alaric's thin lips pressed into a line as he stared at her steadily. These two seemed to be as lively as ever when they met. "When did you and Venus get so close?" Alaric asked after a while, having returned from filling my thermos with water from outside. He placed it on my desk, his fingers trailing over the thermos. Some veins stood out as he pressed the button on the thermos lid. I couldn't help but reach out and press them. "Did you hear what I said?" His voice, tinged with a bit of frost, sounded unhurriedly above my head. "I think Venus is quite nice," I said. "She's not nice. I remember she even pursued you before, and this is how you evaluate her." After getting into university, I could openly pursue Alaric Thornton. I told him I liked him, and he replied with a wicked, That evening, a group of us from class went out for dinner, including Alaric. I gazed at him across the entire table. I looked at him, but he was different from before. In the past, when I looked at him, he wouldn't look back. But now, every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. The inevitable game of truth or dare began, as it always does at gatherings. When it was Alaric's turn, one of his mates, not fearing for his life, asked him, "Alaric, tell the truth, do you fancy Sienna or not?" We locked eyes across the flickering candlelight. His eyes were a kaleidoscope, settling into a dark red. He said, word by word, "I don't." Later, I went to the loo, and he followed, cornering me in the hallway to kiss me. I turned my face away, and his kiss landed askew. "Alaric, didn't you just say you don't fancy me? Alaric, must you be proud about this too?" Afterwards, I deleted all his contact information. When someone clearly rejects you, it seems impolite to keep pestering them. But then, Alaric showed up at my doorstep. "What do you mean by deleting me?" I stared at him wide-eyed, while he frowned. "I'm not chasing after you anymore, Alaric. So you have to delete me just because you're not chasing me? But if you're not the person I fancy, why should I keep your contact, MMPH? Why did it feel like Alaric kissing me was becoming a familiar occurrence? The first 2 times could be explained by him being drunk, but today, he hadn't been drinking, had he? He lazily lowered his lashes, looking at me without hesitation. "You can confess to me again." "I won't." I tilted my head back, looking into his eyes. He gazed at me for a long while before letting out a scornful laugh. "Fine, remember what you said today." "I'm leaving." I nodded. "I'm really leaving." I nodded again. "I'm truly leaving." I still nodded. "If I leave, I won't come back." "Suit yourself." The midday sun was quite bright. So I had to squint to look at him. I thought Alaric used to be shorter than me, but now he's a head taller. I thought Alaric probably fancies me. But I didn't want to let him have his way so easily anymore. Summer holidays, the perfect time for carefree fun. However, the scorching sun often dampens half the crowd's enthusiasm for outdoor activities. Thankfully, the air conditioning in the shopping center is more than adequate. Venus Carr placed the drink she had just ordered in front of me. Today she was wearing ultra-short shorts and a crop top, her figure so enviable it would make even other girls jealous. Not far away in the accessories shop, Zeb Cargill and Bronte Easton were picking out toys. These two had been together since year 10, and somehow managed to survive 3 years under the watchful eye of their form tutor. Quite an achievement, really. Today was meant to be an outing for the 4 of us, me, Venus, Zeb, and Bronte. But there was an unexpected addition. My gaze gradually shifted to the person sitting 2 seats away from me. I could sense the gloom radiating from Alaric Thornton's face. Bronte had sidled up to me earlier and asked, "Why did Alaric come along?" If I had to guess, he's probably trying to court me. "Court you?" "I feel like he's trying to hunt you down." Later on, Zeb, ever the diplomat, managed to smooth things over. He invited Alaric to join us, and so our group of 4 became 5. Oh, and I still hadn't added Alaric back on WhatsApp. He sends me a friend request every day without fail. Venus noticed it once and remarked that Alaric had never shown such persistence even with his maths problems. Bronte and Venus were both keen on buying a newly released figurine, but I wasn't particularly interested. While they were queuing, I browsed the nearby shops. There was a cute pair of cat ears on a headband. As I approached the mirror, I realized Alaric was right behind me. I was looking in the mirror, and he was looking down at me. Suddenly, I had a silly idea. "Alaric, why don't you try these on for me?" I waved the cat ears in front of him, and he stared at me expressionlessly. His dark eyes were inscrutable yet turbulent. They seemed to say, "Do you really think I'd wear something like that?" I sighed. "All right then, never mind." I was about to put the cat ears back on the nearby hook when he lowered his head slightly. It reminded me of that day when he lowered his head for me to tie his tie. His hair looked soft, but sometimes when you actually touched it, it could be a bit prickly. I put the headband on him and looked at our reflection in the mirror. That face of his could make anything look good. "Oh, how adorable," a voice suddenly rang out from behind us. It was a young lady dressed in Lolita fashion, holding up her phone and looking in our direction. "I'm a streamer. Can I take a few photos of you, handsome?" Her voice was soft and sweet, hard to refuse. Alaric raised an eyebrow. For some inexplicable reason, I felt a twinge of annoyance. Without thinking, I quickly removed the cat ears from Alaric's head. Grabbing his wrist, I pulled him away. In that fleeting moment, I thought I heard him chuckle softly. Going to the cinema remains a staple of our shopping center outings. This time, we chose to watch a horror film. I hadn't seen many horror films before, and I'd heard this one wasn't particularly scary. So, without much thought, I joined them in the cinema. Then, I was terrified out of my wits. I clung to Venus Carr's arm beside me, closing my eyes, feeling I'd wasted the ticket price, opening them again, only to find I couldn't bear to watch. Suddenly, the main character whipped her head around, and a ghastly face popped out of nowhere. I jumped, diving into Venus's embrace. Wait a minute. This chest doesn't feel like a girl's. I felt around a bit more, then heard a throat clearing above my head. "Are you sure you want to keep touching?" a slightly husky voice murmured in my ear. "Alaric? Where's Venus?" I shot up, whispering to him. The flickering light from the screen danced in his eyes as he gazed at me quietly. "She just went to the loo." "You didn't notice the empty seat next to you? If you're scared, we can leave." Suddenly, a hand grasped my wrist, his fingertips gently tracing the veins beneath. I closed my eyes briefly, then slipped out with him. When we exited the cinema, night had already fallen over the street. A light rain had just passed, leaving puddles reflecting the chaotic neon lights. Alaric and I stood with our hands in our pockets, waiting for the others to come out. There were some things that needed to be said, properly. "Alaric, are you pursuing me?" I looked up at him, straight to the point. His eyes softly absorbed the street scene, the dazzling lights bustling and bright. "Yes." Such a light answer, as if it could be carried away by the summer evening breeze at any moment. "You could show a bit more sincerity, you know." "I'm learning." Apparently, Alaric had maxed out his math skills but hadn't allocated any points to romance. "Player," I muttered under my breath. "How am I a player?" He narrowed his eyes, leaning in closer. "I confessed to you so many times, and you always turned me down. Now you're chasing after me. Don't you think that's ridiculous?" I glared up at him. He looked at me with a calm, scattered gaze, answering candidly. "I didn't want to date in school back then." After adding Alaric Thornton back, I began to realize how annoying this person could be. Wasn't he supposed to be the quiet type before? Why does he now feel the need to send me photos of every flower that blooms near the entrance of our neighborhood? I just posted a group photo with my friends on Facebook. He spent the entire afternoon interrogating me about the guy on the far right making a peace sign. Eventually, I grew utterly exasperated. When going out with friends, I gradually started inviting him along. Once, while shopping at the mall, I needed to use the loo and asked him to hold my bag. He stood there, clutching my bag, waiting for me. As I was coming out of the restroom, I overheard his conversation with his mate. "Alaric, mate, I never would have guessed. When did you become such a simp?" 2 months ago. His friend let out an exaggerated blimey. "Hang on, you're actually admitting to being a simp?" "Yeah, what of it? I always thought girls were chasing after you." Alaric let out a cold, derisive chuckle. "I've just raised the difficulty level for myself, you muppet." It was the first Christmas break since I started university. Alaric Thornton was still pursuing me. To be honest, I hadn't expected him to chase me for so long. I had thought that if I gave him a hard time, he'd give up. But he was too indulgent with me. As a result, I became more and more difficult, wanting to see where his limit was. When we left for university, our hometown was constructing a new high street. Coming back for the holidays, it was already finished. My parents were eager for me to go out, saying there would be fireworks on the high street these days and I should go see them with young Thornton. So Alaric and I ended up being pushed by the crowd onto a viewing platform. The fireworks leapt brilliantly into the sky, illuminating everything as bright as day when they burst. He lowered his head to kiss me, teasing with a light touch. I turned my head away. "There's some sugar glaze," he said. He reached out and brushed the corner of my mouth. "You could have come up with a better excuse, Alaric Thornton." "I wanted to kiss you." "Why did you want to kiss me?" "Because I like you. I want to be with you." "All right." I clearly saw the person in front of me raise an eyebrow, and then his eyes were suddenly consumed by darkness and desire. He pressed me against the wall of the old town, kissing me fiercely. I never used to think Alaric Thornton was a particularly wild person. Now, my opinion has changed. He's not only wild, but also quite intense. Quite breathtaking, really. On the day of my postgraduate graduation, Alaric Thornton invited me out for dinner. He had been interning at the hospital and was quite busy. When he came to pick me up, his hair was a bit messy. I reached out and tidied his hair a bit. "Mr. Thornton, it's not easy for you to find time to invite me to dinner in your busy schedule, is it?" He looked at me with a slightly helpless expression. The restaurant he had booked was on the top floor of the tallest building in the city, and the ambience was quite posh. Alaric probably didn't know that this was just the beginning of his torment for the evening. Because I had heard from his mates that he was planning to propose to me tonight. Should I make it easy for him? The waiter brought a corkscrew to open the wine, and I swirled my glass. Staring at the man across from me, I said, "Alaric, are you planning to propose to me tonight?" He almost choked on his wine. "Could you not propose to me here?" "There are too many people, I'm worried you might feel embarrassed." He was silent for a moment. "Why would I be embarrassed?" I smiled at him sweetly. "Don't tease me, love, I can't take it," he said. As he spoke, under the table, his trouser leg brushed against my calf. The unfamiliar fabric grazed my skin, and I flinched slightly. This cheeky man, I wasn't sure who would give in first, him or me. The dinner went smoothly enough, though. With my warning, he didn't propose in the restaurant. I stood by the door waiting for him to pay the bill. I had worn my highest heels today, which I hadn't worn in ages, and my calves were aching. He walked towards me, and I reached out to him. "Carry me, Alaric." He obediently crouched down in front of me, and I climbed onto his back. I said I felt dizzy from the wine and didn't want to take a car. He said, "Then I'll carry you home." Home wasn't actually that far, but it was still a bit of a walk. I held onto his neck. It was still early after dinner, around 7 or 8, and the park lights were still on. When we reached a flower shop, he stopped. He put me down and said to wait for him there. I stood there, watching him enter the flower shop and talk to the owner. The night was deep, and the warm light from the shop was serene and peaceful. After a while, he came out with a bouquet of flowers. He took my wrist and led me to the edge of the pond in the park. At this time, there were still elderly people taking their grandchildren for a walk, and a small fountain was creating a dazzling arc of water. The evening stars twinkled lightly, and I asked him, "Alaric, why did you buy the flowers just now?" He coughed and turned his head to explain. "The flowers were supposed to be at the restaurant earlier, but you messed up my plan, didn't you?" He gently tugged on my wrist, and my gaze fell on the man in front of me. I thought about how long it had been since that hot summer when I first fell for him. He knelt down on one knee and presented the flowers to me. In the middle of the roses was a diamond ring. The light refracted gently in the early summer evening breeze. I thought, I've been waiting for this moment for so long. He said, "Sienna Collington, will you marry me?" I squinted my eyes and smiled. "Wicked. Back when I confessed to you, you replied with wicked. I can only say, revenge is a dish best served cold." Alaric raised an eyebrow, then smiled somewhat helplessly. "Don't be like that, love. So many people are watching." In a corner of the park, there were quite a few people chatting, and at this moment, they all stopped what they were doing to look in our direction. "So, didn't I tell you before, Alaric? Don't propose to me in front of so many people, I'm worried you might feel embarrassed." The man in front of me sighed. "You'd better not regret this when we get home." "Are you threatening me?" I widened my eyes at him, but he had already scooped me up in his arms. His hot breath tickled my ear, his low, husky voice lazy and scattered. Drunk people usually don't listen to reason." "Wait, Alaric, how good is your alcohol tolerance anyway?" He carried me up the stairs. I pounded on his back. I just realized something. How come your alcohol tolerance seems to vary? You're not pretending, are you, MMPH? All my words were silenced by his passionate kiss.